Good morning and welcome to another Daily Devotions with Pastor Joe. I'm Pastor Joe, and for this morning's devotions I'd like to read out of Esther, the book of Esther, chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. And I'd like to, over the next couple of weeks, start looking a little deeper into the story of Esther. I know there's a lot of details that I'd like to get across. There's a lot of great lessons that we can learn from Esther's life. She is one of the most well-used characters by God, female characters at least. Interesting fact about the book of Esther, the name of God doesn't actually appear in the book of Esther, and that's not the only name of God, not in any form. God's name does not appear in any form in the book of Esther. So kind of an interesting fact, but you still see his hand moving throughout the book. You still see them looking to him, sort of like in a couple of chapters here. You'll see Mordecai tells Esther, maybe you're here for just such a time as this, saying that maybe God has put you here for specifically that purpose. So let's begin Esther chapter 2. The background to this, King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes is the other name for him. He had gotten upset at his wife Vashti for not doing what he said, which was probably something she shouldn't have done anyway, but she didn't want to do what he said. He said, well, fine, I don't want you around, and kicked her out, divorced her, and left her, and now he's looking for a wife. So let's get back into this. Esther 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti, and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king. Let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hege the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women. And let their things for purification be given them, and let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Hege, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Hege, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her, out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people, nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And this is an amazing story, the story of Esther. So King Ahasuerus had gotten very upset because his wife wouldn't come and show her beauty and dance before a bunch of drunken men. Well, since she refused, the king was very upset because he obviously had been drinking too much himself at this party that he had thrown for himself. And so he kicked her out of the palace, wanted her nowhere near the land again, just gone. She's gone. She's out of the picture. A lot of things happen. Time passes. He remembers Vashti. He finally thinks to himself, man, wait a minute, what about my wife? Because back in those days, in this particular culture, the wife, the queen, wasn't really allowed to come into the presence of the king unless he called for her. And he was such a busy man and so busy with other things that he forgot sometimes for a period that he even had a wife. And so he remembered what happened. His servants said, hey, let's have a beauty contest, basically. And this is where Mordecai comes in. He is there in the land. He's been taken captive. He's a Benjamite. And he's taking care of his niece, Esther. Hadassah is her Israelite name, but they call her Esther because they're trying to cover the fact that she's an Israelite because, well, obviously the Jews were not looked well upon during this time. They were captives. They were slaves. So why should they be looked well upon? They were not people that they really cared for. They were new people who'd been incorporated into the city only because that's the way they subjugated the people. They took them from their home and moved them to a place so completely different that they felt awkward and embarrassed and had to either assimilate into the new culture or basically lose their minds. So here Mordecai, with his niece, whose mother and father were nowhere to be found, they were dead, it says in verse 7. And he says, well, I'm going to take care of you. And so he took her up as his own daughter and raised her as if she were his own daughter. Now, he must have done a very good job of raising her because she listened to him so well. I mean, she followed him throughout this book. Everywhere he says, hey, you really need to do this, she listened to that, saw the wisdom in it, and said, yes, I will honor your request. I will do what you've asked of me. Not as a slave to him, but as an obedient and willing child. She obeys her uncle, who is standing in as a father. So they take Mordecai's daughter, niece, Esther, into the house of women, and the guy who's in charge of all of these women in this house looks at her and says, wow, she's a knockout. She's beautiful. She's amazing. The king is going to love her. I'm giving her the best room, the best part of the house. I'm going to give her these 7 women, and whatever she wants during her period of time for her purification, which was a month, they had to go through a cycle. They gave her everything the best so that she would be able to really impress the king. I think it says in verse 9, they gave her the preferred part of the house. They preferred her to the best place of the house of the women. And through all of this, she spends a month with 7 of these women, of these people who are not Jews as far as we know. They don't seem to have been. They probably are not. They're actually maidens of the house who are a part of those people that were there. She goes through this and does not once reveal to anybody that she's an Israelitess, that she's a Jewess. She does not reveal once who her ancestors and her parents are, and doesn't reveal that Mordecai is a Jew. She doesn't reveal any of that to anybody because she was obeying Mordecai's instruction. And that's just showing her humility. It's showing her submission as a good daughter, as a good child, just should be. Whether it's a daughter or a son, they should be submissive to the will of their parents, the same way Esther is here. And we're going to continue on seeing a little more in this later, how that unfolds. It ends up being kind of a great thing, kind of a terrible thing, because in a way, it almost unlocks all of the problems that are going to be happening later, because the king doesn't even know that she's a Jew until all of the trouble happens through the book of Esther. So it ends up being a great blessing and a curse, and then a great, great blessing at the end. God really had a plan in this. He really had a purpose in this. I don't think it was a good thing. I don't think it was wise of them to be deceitful. If you look back to Abraham and Sarah, you remember that he was deceitful. He didn't necessarily lie, but he held back the truth. He withheld the truth when he said, oh, she's my sister, she's my sister, she's my sister, to all of these kings. And then this king is cursed by God because of it, because he's taken the wife of Abraham. And the king says, hey, I didn't know. Why are you doing this evil thing to me? Abraham ends up getting kind of a little bit hurt by his own mistruth. I'm not going to say a lie, but a mistruth. It was a purposeful deceit that they had done, trying not to really let it all out. And same thing here. Esther and Mordecai, they're keeping that back because they're afraid it's going to hurt them. But if God had it planned for them to wind up in the castle, or palace, I suppose, they would have been there anyway. They didn't have to be deceitful. You don't have to be deceitful to accomplish God's will, ever. All right? I mean, I'm sure that Sarah could have done better. I'm sure that Rahab could have done better. I'm sure that Esther could have done better. And along with that, Abraham and Mordecai, they chose deceit rather than truth. And so that's sort of a sad thing. But the good thing is she was obedient. She was submissive. She was humble. She was beautiful. She was everything she needed to be. And God was putting her in a special place for what we will see to be a very special purpose. So that's the introduction into Esther a little bit. I hope that it's been informative and helpful to you. And if it has, comment down below and like this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any other discussion about this, let me know. I'm ready to bounce my own mind back down into the comments with you. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with those who you think would be wanting to hear some of this kind of content. And check back with us again tomorrow for another daily devotion with Pastor Joe. Thank you so much for joining me. May God bless you greatly today with his presence and his peace, as he always will if you take the time to meet with him first thing in the morning. God bless.